One very important part about being a musician is having the mindset of a musician. Um, I put this more toward the end, but actually, this is possibly more important. Kind of Disneyland in a way, but the way you think about what you're doing is going to determine what actually happens. So, I guess one of the most important things is that if you believe that you're going to be able to do something, you're going to be able to do it. So you believe in yourself. You've heard it a million times, but it's true. So the other thing is you need to find a need. Like, why do you need to do music? Like, what's the reason? It's great. You want to play saxophone, but you need to find like a goal, a purpose for what you're doing. I've had students that say they want to learn saxophone because the buttons are shiny. Not a good goal. That's pick something else. David Sanborn, one of my favorite sax players, played saxophone because the doctor told him he needed to because he had polio. Okay, so that's a need. Maybe we don't have polio, but what's your need? Why do you need to play? What's your reason? What's your goal? What's your drive behind the whole thing? Maybe you want to play songs from the radio. Whatever you're doing, you need to have a goal and a purpose. And there is a difference between practicing and playing. The difference is when you're practicing, you're doing something that you're not good at. When you're playing, you might be playing the exact same thing that you already know, a song that you like, which is great. But that's going to be a slower road to getting to be a real master of the instrument. If you're playing songs that you already know how to play, it's not bad, but in your practicing, you're working on things that you're not good at. Another thing to do is active listening. So the difference between passive listening and active listening is that when you're doing active listening, you're actively listening to the music that you're like. If you're passive listening, you're listening like in the car, or you're listening while you're cooking or whatever. You're active listening. You're listening to the individual sounds that are happening in the music. That's the difference. Now, if you can approach music in that way when you're practicing, that's going to make a difference. Your entire awareness is going to make a difference. If you're aware and present while you're learning, that's going to make the difference. However, I should mention that if you're too self-conscious, if you become too aware, that will that can sabotage what you're trying to do. So there's a very happy medium that you want to shoot for, which is being in between, being aware but being not too aware. Because often self-conscious leads to fear, even in the smallest amount, and that leads to mistakes. So it's like you don't want to be too aware of what you're doing, but you want to be aware enough that you can change it. So it's an interesting concept to talk about, but it's very important when you're performing. So it's kind of like this: when you're performing, your anxiety, or whatever you want to call it, is like the weather, right? It comes and goes, right? The clouds change. The clouds do whatever they're going to do. They could change 5 times in one day, but the sky is always going to be there. So whatever your mind is thinking, you're going to get above that. You're going to be like, oh, yeah, okay, that's my mind. That's what's happening today. How's it going? But you're not going to be affected by it. That's the best way to think about it. If you're worried about, oh, I'm going to screw up, what's probably going to happen? You're going to screw up. So you don't want to be too aware as it relates to fear or any kind of fear. You want to try to get away from that. The awareness is, well, in the opposite direction. You want to be aware of what you're doing, but you're not going to do it in any kind of way that involves fear. It's like the mind of a child. So it's like you're coming from a mind of fascination. Like, oh, that was interesting. I didn't do that, right? Okay, well, I'm going to try that again. That's how you want to think. And that's going to help you. If you come at music with negativity, you will get negativity. And that's why a lot of people get frustrated, is because the mindset is not right. So work with that as you're going through everything. I think this is really important, and it's not often mentioned. But yeah, if you really want to be good at music, you have to really get this in check. Also, if you can make habits, little habits. So I used to learn things while I was waiting to do something else. Listening to music, writing music, playing an instrument, practicing an instrument, whatever. If you got 5 minutes, you can do whatever you need to do. It's a little bit difficult with the saxophone because of the reed. The reed needs to be wet, but do what you can. Basically, you need to make the most use of your time possible. This is especially important when you have working adults, people that are busy. Whatever little time you have, that's where you want to practice. That's where you really want to make use of that. So these are my tips on your mindset and your mentality of being a musician. This is super important. I'm not suggesting that you change anything in your lifestyle. You got your life because you like it, but you're just going to change the way you think about music. So instead of it just being a thing that you do, you're going to have a purpose behind it, a drive, a need. And once you do that, you're going to go in the right direction. And then the awareness, but the lack of fear awareness, the lack of self-consciousness is what we want to shoot for. Lack of self-consciousness, but awareness of what you're doing. Hope that helps.